Have you ever had an opportunity so big it felt completely impossible to mess up? Imagine having exactly 24 hours to change your entire life with just one simple task. It sounds like a dream, yet for Jake, this golden opportunity turned into a nightmare. He stood on the brink of wealth, watching his future slowly slip through his fingers. The paradox is simple. He had an entire day to finish a 30-minute chore. Having 24 hours for a 30-minute task is like having an ocean to fill a glass. Most people would jump at the chance to secure their future in less than an hour. But procrastination is a silent thief that steals time when we feel we have plenty. Jake held a magic stone that promised him everything he ever wanted for his life. To unlock this wealth, he only needed to reach the market within his strict deadline. A quick 30-minute walk was all that stood between him and a lifetime of riches. Yet, instead of moving immediately, he decided that he had more than enough time. This is the danger of a long deadline when a task seems too easy to fail. We often let laziness take the wheel when the finish line feels so close. How do you lose a fortune when you have 24 hours and only need 30? Is it possible that the biggest enemy of your success is sitting right next to you? Jake's story is a warning for every student and young adult chasing a better life. It reveals how procrastination can destroy even the most certain path to personal success. Sometimes the 2-minute rule is the only thing saving us from our own bad habits. We assume time is infinite, but opportunities disappear the moment we start to hesitate. For Jake, the clock was ticking, even if he refused to hear the seconds passing. He felt secure in his 24-hour window, ignoring the looming end of his chance. Every minute spent in laziness brought him closer to losing the power of the stone. This is the tragic story of a man who had everything and lost it all. But to understand why this happened, we have to look at where Jake's journey began. Jake didn't live in a world of skyscrapers or high-speed internet, but in a quiet, distant village. Deep in the countryside, his small village felt like a bubble isolated from the modern world's rush. Imagine a place where time moves slowly, far away from the neon lights and city traffic. In this forgotten corner of the map, Jake's daily life was defined by simplicity and constant repetition. The village was tucked away, miles from the nearest city where every opportunity seemed to grow on trees. For Jake, the bustling metropolis was nothing more than a distant dream he could barely even imagine. Every morning began the same way within the crowded walls of his modest and noisy family home. He shared this small space with his parents, who worked hard to provide for their growing family. His parents were the anchors of the household, keeping everything running despite the daily struggles they faced. They hoped for a bright future for their sons, even if the path forward seemed totally uncertain. Also living under the same roof was Jake's energetic little brother, a constant source of noisy play. His brother's laughter often filled the rooms, contrasting sharply with Jake's growing sense of restless boredom. Having a younger sibling meant there was never a moment of true silence or quiet personal space. But the household wasn't just made of the young, it also held the heavy wisdom of age. Jake's grandfather lived there too, a quiet presence watching the world change from his favorite chair. The old man carried stories of the past, representing a legacy that felt heavy on Jake's shoulders. Living with 3 generations meant the house was always full of different voices and conflicting expectations. It was a home built on tradition, where procrastination often felt like the only way to escape. While his family moved with the steady rhythm of village life, Jake felt like he was stalling. He loved his family, yet he couldn't help but feel trapped by the walls of their home. What happens when a big dream is trapped in a small, quiet place like this isolated village? Jake often wondered if he would ever break free from the laziness that seemed to haunt him. He felt the weight of his family's hopes while struggling to find his own sense of purpose. The distance to the city was more than miles. It felt like an impossible gap to bridge. Surrounded by his parents, brother, and grandfather, Jake felt both supported and strangely alone in his ambition. The quiet atmosphere of the village only amplified the internal noise of his own deep frustrations. Every day was a cycle of chores and routine, leaving little room for the greatness he desired. He was a young man caught between his responsibilities at home and the lure of the unknown. While life seemed peaceful on the surface, Jake was battling an internal cycle of constant procrastination. But inside this quiet home, a storm of frustration was brewing. While the village was peaceful, Jake was at war with his own habits and mounting internal conflict. Deep within his quiet room, Jake surrendered daily to a heavy, unshakable cloud of extreme laziness. Does "I will do it tomorrow" sound familiar to you? Because for Jake, it was a daily mantra. He He treated procrastination like a comfort blanket, wrapping himself in the false promise of future effort. Every small responsibility was habitually postponed, pushed further away into an ever-growing pile of unfinished work. Postponing tasks is like trying to outrun a snowball rolling down a mountain, gaining speed and weight. As the sun set each day, those delayed chores and lessons transformed into a massive mountain of stress. He ignored every looming deadline, convinced that a better opportunity to work would somehow appear later. He never learned the 2-minute rule, which could have saved him from this spiraling cycle of delay. Eventually, the weight of his inaction turned into a visceral sense of deep, crushing regret. That regret felt like a cold stone in his stomach, a constant reminder of wasted potential. Have you ever watched your friends pull ahead while you stood still, trapped in your own inaction? Jake watched helplessly as his peers in school surpassed him, their progress highlighting his own stagnation. While his friends celebrated their small victories, Jake remained anchored to the floor by his habits. The simple tasks he ignored became impossible hurdles that stole his peace and clouded his mind. His extreme laziness was not just a trait. It was a thief stealing the person he could become. He dreamed of a magic stone or a shortcut that would solve his problems without effort. Every missed lesson was a brick added to a wall separating him from his own bright future. He would stare at his textbooks with tearful eyes, wishing he had started when he first had the chance. He was not just losing precious time. He was rapidly losing his grip on a successful future. Every morning began with the silent weight of a future that felt increasingly out of reach. The small village quieted, but Jake's mind raced with the heavy burden of his own procrastination. He soon discovered that laziness acts like a heavy chain, tightening with every missed opportunity. Because of his constant delays, Jake watched as his simple tasks accumulated into a mountain daily. What started as a small chore soon transformed into a deadline that felt impossible to meet. He realized that ignoring a task today only makes it twice as heavy for tomorrow's self. This daily accumulation turned his workspace into a graveyard of abandoned ideas and unfulfilled potential. Each sunrise brought a fresh reminder of the growing list he was too paralyzed to start. Deep down, Jake felt a sharp sting of regret as the pile of work grew taller. That regret wasn't just about the work. It was about the person he was slowly becoming. He stood at a crossroads, watching his dreams slip away while he remained frozen in place. The crushing weight of these unfinished tasks felt as heavy as a cursed magic stone. Every time he looked in the mirror, the shadow of regret stared back with hollow eyes. He often wondered how a few minutes of laziness could lead to such a profound sense of failure. While Jake struggled to move, he noticed his friends were steadily climbing toward their own goals. He watched from the sidelines as they navigated school with a confidence he no longer possessed. The gap between him and his peers grew wider with every passing week of school. Falling behind his friends felt like a public admission of his own internal defeat. They were moving forward into their futures, while Jake felt anchored to his past mistakes. The social cost of his procrastination was becoming harder to ignore in their small village. He saw them mastering new skills while he struggled to remember the last time he finished anything. This isolation was the hidden price of a life dictated by the whims of laziness. He desperately needed a simple strategy, perhaps something like the 2-minute rule, to break the cycle. But for now, he was trapped in a cycle of waiting for an opportunity that never arrived. The pressure of his mounting schoolwork became a physical presence that followed him everywhere. He realized that falling behind is a slow descent into a valley of deep personal shame. The contrast between his potential and his reality was a truth he could no longer escape. He was becoming a spectator in his own life, watching the world move on without him. The weight of his accumulated tasks was finally pushing Jake to a breaking point he feared. He began to understand that the cost of doing nothing was far greater than he imagined. Jake's father had seen enough and decided it was finally time to address his son's growing laziness. What do you do when scolding isn't enough to break a cycle of endless procrastination? He watched as his son let every golden opportunity slip away while the clocks ticked relentlessly forward. Every morning began with a lecture about the heavy cost of wasted time and missed deadlines. The father's voice would echo through their small village home, filled with a mixture of frustration and worry. He spoke of the magic stone of success that only reveals itself to those who work hard. But Jake simply nodded his head while his mind drifted back into a comfortable state of inaction. No matter how loud the reprimands became, the young man remained trapped in his own heavy shell. The father tried explaining the 2-minute rule, hoping a small change might spark a much larger transformation. He pleaded with Jake to understand that a single missed deadline could change the course of a lifetime. Yet, the cycle of laziness continued as if his father's stern warnings were nothing more than background noise. Day after day, the tension in the household grew as the father's traditional discipline continued to fail. He began to realize that shouting was a blunt tool that couldn't pierce Jake's thick armor of indifference. Who is the one person you actually listen to when you're stuck in a deep, dark rut? The father knew he needed a different approach, one that carried more weight than his own frustrated words. In the village, there was one man whose wisdom was sought by everyone facing life's hardest challenges. The grandfather was a figure of quiet strength, known for solving problems that seemed entirely impossible to others. He possessed an ancient understanding of human nature and the subtle art of true personal transformation. People traveled from distant lands just to hear a single sentence of advice from this legendary elder. The father looked at his son one last time and knew he couldn't win this battle alone. He made the difficult choice to seek an intervention from the one man Jake truly respected. Walking toward the old man's hut, the father felt a flicker of hope for the very first time. He would ask the grandfather to step in and finally break the curse of Jake's persistent laziness. Only a master of wisdom could teach a young man the true value of every passing second. He knew only one person could break through Jake's shell and finally change his life forever. The grandfather reached into his worn pocket and pulled out something that changed everything for Jake. People from across the village often sought advice from the old man known for his deep wisdom. Jake's grandfather was respected as a wise man who understood the hidden secrets of the universe. He slowly opened his hand to reveal a small, dull black stone resting in his weathered palm. With a mysterious glint in his eye, the old man claimed this was no ordinary pebble. He whispered that this small, heavy object was actually a powerful and legendary magic stone. What if a single object could turn your life of laziness into one of unimaginable wealth? The grandfather explained that rubbing this stone against any piece of iron would instantly create gold. Imagine every rusty nail or old iron tool in your house suddenly transforming into shimmering gold. This stone was essentially a key to a vault that contained no limits and no end. Holding this stone meant the owner could become as rich as they had ever dreamed possible. For Jake, who struggled with procrastination, this seemed like the ultimate shortcut to a successful life. This magic stone offered a rare opportunity to finally leave his habits of laziness behind. Jake looked at the stone, imagining piles of gold coins and the freedom they would provide. If you held a magic stone like this, what would be the very first thing you'd do? The silence in the room felt heavy as Jake realized the magnitude of what he held. Every piece of junk iron nearby was now a potential fortune waiting for the stone's touch. The grandfather watched his grandson closely, waiting to see if Jake truly understood this immense power. This was the ultimate test for a young man who had spent years avoiding any effort. With this stone, poverty would become a distant memory, and every dream could finally become reality. The rules were simple, but the potential for changing his life was absolutely infinite. The clock started ticking the moment that shimmering magic stone finally touched Jake's eager hand. His grandfather made the terms clear. He would be away for exactly one full day. This precious opportunity came with a strict deadline that would end by the following evening. Jake held the power to turn iron into gold, but time was already slipping away. He knew that overcoming his lifelong habit of laziness was now his most urgent challenge. Instead of rushing out immediately, Jake decided to wait until the next morning to start. He envisioned himself walking to the local market to purchase as much scrap iron as possible. With a full day ahead, he felt there was plenty of time to execute his plan. But procrastination has a way of making a 24-hour window feel like an absolute eternity. Why start the hard work now when the sun was already beginning its slow descent? He told himself that a well-rested mind would be far more efficient for tomorrow's heavy lifting. The trap of tomorrow is the favorite hiding place for those who fear taking action. Jake sat down for a hearty dinner, the weight of the stone resting in his pocket. Every bite of food felt like a small celebration of the wealth he hadn't yet earned. The magic stone whispered of riches, yet the comfort of his home whispered of rest. He ignored the 2-minute rule, choosing to delay his simple preparations for a later time. As evening settled over the quiet village, Jake prepared himself for a long night of sleep. He climbed into bed, convinced that his golden future was safely waiting for the sunrise. Is the temporary comfort of your bed truly more valuable than a mountain of gold? He closed his eyes, unaware that he was already losing his battle against his own nature. The grandfather would return by the next evening to reclaim the stone, regardless of Jake's progress. How do you go from dreaming of being rich to simply choosing to sleep instead? His plan for the market was solid, but his discipline was already starting to crumble. The first hours of his deadline were spent in a deep, unproductive slumber beneath the sheets. He had the stone, he had the plan, but he also had a very comfortable pillow. Have you ever felt like you had all the time in the world to finish a task? We often convince ourselves that a distant deadline means we can start much later than necessary. This psychological trap is exactly where Jake found himself after receiving his precious magic stone. He held the power to change his life, yet he felt no immediate pressure to begin. His grandfather planned to be away for just one day, leaving Jake with plenty of room. The deadline was set for the following evening, giving him a massive window of opportunity. With a full 24 hours ahead of him, the urgency of the moment simply faded away. Procrastination whispered that there was no need to rush toward the market quite yet. He knew the journey to the marketplace would only take him about 30 minutes total. 30 minutes out of 24 hours felt like a tiny drop in a very large bucket. This massive surplus of time created a dangerous illusion of safety in Jake's young mind. Laziness began to mask itself as logical planning, making his delays seem like a smart choice. We often overestimate how much we can accomplish later, neglecting the power of the present moment. When we think we have enough time, we stop respecting the clock and start wasting it. Jake didn't realize that every hour spent sleeping was an hour of magic he would never reclaim. The opportunity of a lifetime was slipping through his fingers while he drifted off into dreams. This is the same reason why we push our biggest goals to some vague point in the future. We tell ourselves that tomorrow will be better, more productive, and somehow more energetic than today. But the deadline doesn't care about our excuses or the comfort of our favorite pillows. If a task takes only minutes, ignoring the 2-minute rule can lead to hours of regret. Jake's overestimation of his future time was a classic mistake that many of us repeat daily. He saw a wide horizon of hours, failing to notice the sun was already starting to move. The magic stone sat quietly on the table, its potential frozen by his choice to wait. By prioritizing rest over action, he was unknowingly setting the stage for a frantic race later. We must learn to treat our time as a finite resource rather than an infinite supply. Jake's 30-minute task was simple, but his mindset made it feel like something for another time. The trap of tomorrow is built on the false promise that we will have more focus later. As he slept, the clock continued its steady, unforgiving rhythm toward that final evening deadline. The tragedy of procrastination isn't just lost time, but the wasted potential of our magic stones. Jake was about to learn that 24 hours can disappear much faster than anyone expects. Morning arrived, casting long shadows across the room where Jake's golden opportunity sat patiently waiting. The ticking of the magic stone's deadline grew louder as the first light hit the floor. Instead of springing into action, Jake felt the familiar, heavy pull of his old lazy habits. He looked toward the kitchen, wondering if a full stomach was worth more than a fortune. Jake decided to have breakfast first, pushing his urgent goal of buying iron to the side. He told himself that a hero shouldn't start a life-changing quest on an entirely empty stomach. The scent of cooking filled the small home, creating a temporary sanctuary from his mounting responsibilities. Every minute spent over the stove was a minute stolen from the precious time he had left. His procrastination was a soft trap, lined with the simple, distracting pleasures of a warm meal. As he finished the last bite, a wave of intense sleepiness washed over his entire body. The heavy meal acted like a sedative, dulling the sharp edges of his previous morning ambition. Have you ever felt that sudden, overwhelming urge to rest right when you should be working? Jake's eyes became heavy, his vision blurring as the warmth of the room embraced him. He looked at his bed, thinking that a 5-minute nap would surely sharpen his focus later. Ignoring the ticking clock, he lay down and let the soft pillows cradle his tired head. The 2-minute rule was forgotten as he succumbed to the siren song of a morning nap. Within moments, Jake fell into a deep sleep, leaving his grand plans for the scrap iron. The magic stone shimmered on the table, its power wasted on a man lost in dreams. Valuable hours slipped away in silence while the sun continued its steady march across the sky. But the sun doesn't wait for anyone to finish their nap before the deadline finally arrives. When Jake finally opened his eyes, the world was a different color than he remembered. The brilliant morning light had vanished, replaced by the long, deep shadows of a setting sun. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he realized how many hours had slipped away. His laziness had turned a golden opportunity into a nightmare of wasted time and regretful silence. The orange glow hitting the walls confirmed the deadline he feared was now rapidly approaching its end. He reached out for the magic stone, desperate to make it to the market before dark. Before he could even stand up, the heavy sound of a familiar footstep echoed through the room. His grandfather stood in the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the dusty floorboards. No words were spoken at first, but the disappointment in the old man's eyes was deafening. The market was still miles away, and the window for his success had finally slammed shut. If only he had followed the 2-minute rule, his life might have been changed forever today. Procrastination had whispered lies of endless time while the clock was actually stealing his future away. Without saying a single word, his grandfather walked forward and reached for the shimmering magic stone. Jake watched in frozen silence as the source of his potential wealth was lifted from his palm. The weight of the stone left his hand, replaced by the crushing burden of a missed chance. Can you imagine the feeling in your stomach when you realize you are far too late? He had everything he needed to succeed, yet he chose the comfort of a temporary nap. His grandfather's face held a look of quiet sadness that cut deeper than any harsh reprimand. The magic stone was gone, reclaimed by the hands that had originally offered it in hope. What is the exact sound of a life-changing opportunity vanishing into the thin evening air? In an instant, the magic and the future was gone, leaving only the darkness of the coming night. The shimmering magic stone was gone, but the real lesson for Jake was only just beginning. As the moonlight faded, Jake looked up at his grandfather, whose eyes held a deep, ancient wisdom. Is failure really a loss if it changes who you are and how you see the world? The old man spoke softly, explaining that laziness is a silent thief that prevents all great achievement. He whispered that those who succumb to a life of ease will never reach their true potential. The truth hit Jake harder than the loss of the gold. Lazy people cannot achieve anything significant. Grandfather then shared a harder truth, emphasizing that those who do not value time achieve absolutely nothing. Every wasted second is a missed opportunity, a brick in the wall standing between you and success. Without respect for the ticking clock, even the most talented people find themselves left behind in life. Jake felt the weight of every hour he had squandered while waiting for the perfect moment. The myth that tomorrow is a better time to start was finally shattered by his grandfather's words. What would you promise yourself if you were standing in Jake's shoes, facing a wasted future? Determination flared in Jake's chest as he realized that procrastination had been his only true enemy. With a steady voice, Jake promised his grandfather that he would never let laziness win again. This wasn't just a hollow apology, but a deep vow to change the very core of his character. He swore to rise with the sun and tackle every challenge before the shadow of doubt crept in. Jake also made a solemn promise to use every single minute of his time wisely and purposefully. He understood now that time is the only currency that can never be earned back once spent. The 2-minute rule became his new mantra, a simple tool to defeat the urge to delay action. Every deadline would now be met with a new fire, fueled by the memory of the lost stone. Jake looked at his empty hands and realized he didn't need a magic stone to build greatness. The boy who woke up late was gone, replaced by a young man ready to seize the day. He stood tall, knowing that his future would be written by his actions, not his idle dreams. Jake lost the gold that night, but he gained a mindset that was worth much more. The lesson was etched into his soul, a permanent reminder that the best time to act is now. Now, you might not have a magic stone, but you have something just as powerful right now. Like Jake, we often let procrastination steal our best opportunities while waiting for a perfect tomorrow. Have you ever wondered what your own 30-minute market trip is that you keep putting off? Breaking the cycle of laziness requires more than just willpower. It requires a concrete plan for action. One of the most effective ways to beat the clock is by setting a firm, unavoidable deadline. You see, setting a deadline can help you finish your most difficult tasks much faster than before. Without a limit, your focus tends to drift away like a leaf floating down a slow river. Think of a deadline like a sturdy fence that keeps your focus from wandering into the woods. When the boundaries are clear, your mind stops looking for excuses and starts looking for creative solutions. But what do you do when the mountain of work ahead of you feels completely overwhelming? This is where you can use the power of the simple but life-changing 2-minute rule. Scientific claims suggest that committing to a task for just 2 minutes can help initiate progress quickly. Most of the friction we feel is just the starting line, not the actual race we are running. Can you commit to just 2 minutes right now to change the course of your entire day? Whether it is cleaning your room or starting a project, 2 minutes is all you really need. Once you break the seal of inaction, you will find that the momentum carries you much further. Do not wait for a magic stone to fall into your lap before you decide to move. Your opportunity is happening right now, hiding inside the minutes you are currently letting slip away. The only difference between you and the version of you that succeeds is remarkably small. It is simply about what you decide to do in the next 120 seconds. Most people think they need to feel inspired before they can finally start working. We often wait for a surge of energy that simply refuses to show up. This cycle of waiting is the hidden engine that powers our worst procrastination habits. You believe you are just resting, but you are actually falling into a dangerous trap. Remember how Jake felt sleepy immediately after eating his breakfast in the morning sun? He wasn't just tired. He was waiting for the perfect moment to feel ready. That feeling of sleepiness was a wall between his laziness and his golden opportunity. If you wait until you feel like doing it, you might wait forever. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action, but rather a byproduct of starting. This is where the life-changing power of the 2-minute rule comes into play. By committing to any task for just 2 minutes, you break the initial resistance. It sounds too simple to work, yet it is the ultimate cure for procrastination. Those first 120 seconds are the hardest part of any journey. Once you begin moving, the heavy weight of your laziness begins to lift away. Action creates the momentum that your brain was waiting for all along. Jake didn't need a magic stone to succeed. He just needed to start moving. The deadline doesn't care if you feel sleepy or if you feel fully awake. Your goals are waiting for you to prove that you are serious about them. Stop looking for a magic stone and start looking for a 2-minute window. This tiny shift in perspective transforms a looming deadline into a manageable step. The secret to beating laziness is realizing that starting is the only real hurdle. Your future self is shaped by the courage you find in these small moments. Do not let a moment of sleepiness steal the opportunity of a lifetime. Every great achievement in history began with a simple 2-minute commitment to action. When you choose to act, you finally take control of your own internal clock. If this story sparked something in you, do not let it fade like Jake's final sunset. The magic stone may be gone, but the opportunity to change your life is here. Every single day we face the same laziness that cost Jake his greatest possible wealth. Procrastination is a silent thief that steals our most valuable resource 1 minute at a time. You have the power to break that cycle by choosing to act right now instead. Think about the people in your life who are currently struggling with their own deadlines. Who in your life needs to hear this lesson about time and lost opportunities today? Sharing this story could be the exact wake-up call a friend needs to start moving. Help us spread this message of growth by sending this video to someone you value. We are building a community dedicated to overcoming laziness and achieving real personal growth. Joining our group means you will never have to face your toughest goals completely alone. Hit the subscribe button to ensure you never miss our next deep dive into productivity. We are constantly exploring strategies like the 2-minute rule to help you succeed every day. Do not let your potential become another cautionary tale of what could have been today. Every choice you make today ripples outward to create the future you want to inhabit. Remember that the clock never stops ticking, even when we choose to ignore its sound. Let us commit together to treating every hour as if it were a shimmering magic stone. Your journey towards self-improvement is just beginning, and we are here to support you. Leave a comment below sharing one thing you plan to stop putting off right now. Thank you for spending your precious time with us today as we learn and grow. I will see you in the next one as we continue our path toward mastery together.